Alright, so this video is about these wedges, more generally this kind of wedge. This is called, as I now know, a socket wedge. Sometimes it's online as a hollow wedge. And I saw pictures and videos of people using these online. And I thought, and I also found it in old books, and I thought it seemed like a great idea, because what it is it's a metal wedge with a socket. Wood fits in, and the wood is a striking surface, and it's held together by a ring. And so the wood mushrooms, holds the ring on, but the wood stays intact because of the ring and because it's in the socket. And so this is the part that you pound on, and you can use them for felling, which is what this kind is marketed for, or you can use them for riving and splitting. And in fact, I think for most you can do both. So you can do both with this one, and I'll show you how I set that up. The part that wears out and is consumable and replaceable is the wooden part, which you can do for essentially for free. And the part that that you don't want to wear out, that you want to keep working, stays working and doesn't wear out, which is the metal part. And not only that, but you don't have to hit metal on metal. You hit metal on wood. And so of course you can use a regular axe with a regular non-hardened pole to drive it, just like a plastic wedge. So I thought, I saw this online at first and a couple of books, and I thought, what a great idea. But I had a really hard time finding information about it, and I had a hard time getting a hold of any. And now that I have, and now that I've tried it out, see how it works, tested it a little bit, I want to tell you guys about it, because it is a great idea, and they do work great. And I wish that more people knew about them, and I wish that they were more available. If you're in Europe and the UK, you can get them. Here in North America, it seems to be trickier. There's some old ones on eBay, and there's new ones still being made. So this is Ochsenkopf, but you have to pay shipping, as far as I could tell, in North America to get them. So I did, and I think it's worth it. So yeah, I'll show you how they work, how I got it to work, and some of the things that I like about it.
Here's the problem that had me looking for an alternative to regular plastic wedges. My big 42-inch bow saw is great for doing the back cut, except for one problem, which is that it leaves a very narrow kerf. So when it comes time to pound wedges, it's really tough to get the regular plastic wedges to bite in and get started into the cut.
Damn it.
Unsurprisingly, this is hard on plastic wedges, and they often broke on me, which is kind of a waste and was annoying. A solution is to use slim steel splitting wedges, but that means you have to bring a hammer or a maul or something else with a hardened striking surface, because you can't hit steel wedges with a pole axe that doesn't have a hardened pole without damaging it. This is inconvenient because it means you have to carry steel wedges, which are very heavy, in addition to another heavy striking implement. But it's the only thing I've found that reliably works in this situation.
Something that's come up with the steel wedges in a lot of the things I've been reading, both before I started looking into socket wedges and after, is that the steel wedges eventually start to mushroom, and as they do, you are supposed to remove these, and I've been negligent in that, but I'm going to start before I use this one again, because apparently a really common source of injury is that these pieces break off and they can fly towards you at pretty high velocity. So one of the books I read about splitting firewood, the author says that he surveyed nurses in emergency departments about common firewood collecting injuries, and one of the most common was actually people getting injured by these sharp shards of metal flying off. So that's one advantage with a hollow wedge, is that it's safer because you're not hitting metal against metal, and specifically steel against steel.
Because of these difficulties, I was looking for a solution that would be more effective for wedging trees during felling as well as for splitting. And I saw these neat wedges in a couple of Mr. Chickadee's videos, so I'll put a link to that. But he uses it for splitting out billets for an axe handle, and he also uses it when making a split rail fence, but he never says what they're called. And another place where I saw them is in Roy Underhill's book, The Woodwright Shop, and there he calls it an iron glut with a wooden insert, and that didn't really help me out much either. It turns out that I'm not the only one that doesn't know what they're called. It seems like nobody knows what the proper name is for these in English anymore, even though they're still manufactured. So here's a version from Steel in the UK, and it's only on their UK site. And they just call it a forged wooden wedge, which what the heck does that mean? Or an aluminum chainsaw wedge, which is too vague to be searchable. You basically can't Google anything useful with that information. Eventually I found out that you can find out more about them under the name hollow-wedge. So Ochsenkopf still sells these, and the hollow-wedge is just a direct, presumably Google Translate version of the German term, which is Heizskeil. And it's not the actual traditional term for this kind of wedge in English. It turns out there's several European manufacturers that make hollow wedges out of either aluminum or steel, depending. So these include Müller in Austria, Helco Works in Germany, as well as Bison and Stubai. However, I still wasn't able to find much information out about their use and availability in North America.
This book is about how to make a chair from a tree. It's I think a pretty famous book. I picked this one up at a community book sale. And this shows the use of a socket wedge. And actually, I didn't know what it was called, but it's discussed here at on page 37. Shows the socket wedge, and it says the name. Socket wedges with replaceable wooden heads are safer than all metal wedges. So I've seen that point made a few times. So this is a good example of it being used to split a log for riving for greenwood working into chairs.
So once I learned the term socket wedge, I was able to find more examples of their existence and how to use them in older books and things like that. So for example, this book from 1987 on wood harvesting with hand tools recommends them both for felling and for splitting. I'll put links to these books and things that I'm referencing in the video description if anyone else wants to take a look at them. This book from 1981 that I already mentioned also recommends socket wedges. Here's an article from 1893 on building rough fencing, and it mentions socket wedges and has a little illustration. The oldest reference to socket wedges that I came across was in the Bulletin of the Historical Society of Montgomery County in Pennsylvania, where they mentioned that they were for sale at a local foundry in 1800. None of this really helped me to actually get one to try for myself. So there's some vintage ones available on eBay, which look very interesting, but they're in the States. The shipping to Canada is a little expensive, so that didn't really help me either. So finally what I ended up doing was just biting the bullet and buying internationally. I got Ochsenkopf wedges, got a pair of them, and the first thing that I had to do, because these are the Ochsenkopf felling wedges, they're made for use with chainsaws. So the leading edge was very, very blunt to fit into a chainsaw kerf, and I needed it to fit into the Bowsaw kerf. So the first thing that I had to do was sharpen it up. So I didn't actually sharpen it. I just filed it until the leading edge was very, very narrow. So it would fit into the kerf, but it's not going to cut anything. It's not going to cut any fibers. Because I think that, having aluminum taken down to such a thin edge would end up leading it to be damaged. So I found this worked well, is just to leave it maybe 1/3 of a millimeter thick at the edge. This is a big dead green ash, and it's the first tree I tried to use the socket wedges for the back cut. And at this point, I still had some kinks to work out.
Oh man.
One annoyance is that with the new pegs, there's no mushrooming to hold the ring on, so that kept falling off. That was driving me crazy for a little bit. Anyway, the camera battery ran out, and I just wanted to get this done, so I didn't change it. So I didn't film the rest of it, but by the end of this felling job, I got through it, but by the end, the peg that I got from Ochsenkopf on one of the wedges was pretty much shot. So I pretty quickly got to practice replacing it. Basically, the problem the broken peg had was grain run out, which is a big achievement considering it's only about 25 centimeters long. Anyway, that should be easy for me to avoid just by using a straight split piece of wood. That could be a nice stick of firewood, but in this case, it's an accidental reject piece of rock elm. You could also use a pole, which I'll show later. I've got another backleaning dead ash to fall, so I can show you the socket wedges in action. The first order of business is to clear away the grapevines and brush out an escape route that I can go down when the tree is about to fall. So in this case, that means taking the brush hook and clearing away enough of the prickly ash that I'll be able to get through in a hurry if I have to. As it happens, the handle of this axe is green ash, which is the same species that I'm cutting right now. Here I'm adjusting the face cut to make sure it points towards the intended lay so that the tree is going to fall where I want it. I could have done this whole operation with just the one axe, but it's easy enough for me to bring two out here. It's close to my house, so I did. And so I switched to the faller's axe that I had set up. So that's a slightly heavier head, 4-pound rafting pattern on a straight stick in order to pound wedges because that's what it's set up for, and I like to use it. The handle of this axe is made out of ironwood or American hop hornbeam, and that's a tree species that's going to come up again a little bit later in the video. I haven't quite got the procedure perfected yet. In case it wasn't obvious, I've switched cameras, so now I'm filming on my phone, and I've moved my other camera to the side. And so that's going to show how far the tree moves as I pound the wedges into the back cut. So I'll come back to that view in a minute. Here's the side view again, and I've overlaid a transparency of where the tree started, and that should show the amount of lift that I'm getting from the wedges from the start of wedging to the end. And of course the footage is sped up by like 1,000%. Normally I'd take the bow saw out of the kerf before I got the wedges in this far, but this blade is almost ready to be replaced, so I'm not too worried about it.
I think it's about to go.
So the tree I just took down is actually the last one of a clump of 7 ash that I've been clearing out. They've all died from the old ash borer. And what I did was I split them up in place. So they're all done with the axe. This is for the axe cordwood challenge. And I split them up in place and then just kept dropping successive trees onto the split logs that I've already processed. And the reason for doing that basically is so that I minimize the amount of time I was having to chop in muddy wood and damage the blades of my axes. So that's why I'm working over top of all this split wood. One of the nice things about the saga wedges is that they're at a fairly wide angle, so you get more lift than you would with a plastic wedge, at least a normal thickness plastic wedge. The only problem is that you can't stack them. So in this case I didn't have to, but if I thought I would want more lift than I could get out of one layer of wedges, then I'd probably just bring some plastic wedges with me that I could stack in order to get more lift if I really needed it. So what I would do if I did need to use plastic wedges is that I would still start wedging the kerf with the socket wedges, and then I'd just use a stack of plastic wedges in between or beside the socket wedges. If you find that you really do need more lift and you're not prepared, you don't have enough wedges, it is possible to improvise wooden wedges from, using an axe and a saw based on what you can find in the woods. That's, if you really have to.
Alright, so I've got the 7 trees from that clump of ash all split up, including the one that I wedged over. The only thing that's left is one crotch piece that I did not try to split with the axe because that's going to be very difficult. But what I can do is see how these work as splitting wedges. So I have done it before, but I'll just try it out on this. This seems like a tough job, so let's see how they work. All right. Presto. Still pretty big, but good for overnighter. All right, it's kind of breezy. Let's hope the wind noise doesn't ruin the audio. But let's imagine you're in the woods, falling a tree, and the wooden peg part of the hollow wedge has failed, and you need to replace it in the field. So I think that's going to be pretty easy. I haven't done it before, but I'm going to try it out. Basically, you're going to need two things, which you will definitely have with you if you're felling a tree with a saw and wedges, which is a saw, and hopefully the thing that you're using to pound wedges is an axe, and you've got it sharp. And then all you'll need is to find a sapling or a branch or something like that. So in this case, I'm in this very dense stand of ironwood. I think Americans would probably know it more like as American hop hornbeam. So this tree here, and I think it'll be good. And there's like very dense saplings right here. Of course, they're all competing with each other. They're competing with a cherry and a hickory. So I think it'd be good to thin them anyway. So I'm going to use this sapling to replace the peg part of hollow wedge. So ironwood or hop hornbeam, you know, the name ironwood can refer to a bunch of different trees depending on where you are in the world. Seems like everywhere has their own tree that's called ironwood, but this is ours. Anyway, it's about as hard as hickory and about as tough. It might not be quite as elastic, but it's very hard stuff. I don't think you need to find anything quite that hard. Ochsenkopf uses European beech, so I guess if that's good enough, then a bunch of other things would be, so like probably hard maple and ash, or smaller trees like hornbeam / blue beech, American beech, yeah. Of course hickory. So depending on where you are, probably yellow birch or one of the other harder birches would do okay. Sweet birch. So yeah, I think anything that's relatively hard will be good enough. I said that you only need two things. I think that's true, which is an axe and a saw. But I think it's helpful probably to also have a pencil and whatever's left of your broken wedge peg, because then you can just, trace the outline on. So, now this doesn't have to be exact, I don't think. Based on my experience, the last one I made, I didn't get it perfect. It worked great. So, yeah, not to be exact. The other thing is I'm going to cheat a little bit. So because I actually already replaced this one, the aluminum ring that holds it together is basically stuck on the replacement. So I couldn't get it off to do this, to try and make a replacement this way. So I'm just going to fit this end, and then we'll kind of imagine that I would have to shape the other end to fit into the ring as well, so that the ring will sit on, not slide all the way on, but slide on a little ways, so that it'll hold the mushrooming wood together. All right, I think that that will work for that end. And then for this end, we'll imagine we have the ring to make sure that it's the right size. All right, So there you go. So I think this would work. You could get that seated in there, get the ring on there, put it into the kerf, and start wedging a tree over with that. And then this would last, I suspect, this will last a long time. I'm going to pack this back with me, and the next time I have to change one, I'll have it with me, and I can use it, and I'll find out. And if I think of it, maybe I'll put it in an update video or something, or just leave it, pin it as a comment, to let you guys know if it worked or if it didn't work. All right. All right, going to do a little reforestation just to replace those ash that I cut down. I've got a selection of local trees. I've got white spruce, sugar maple, red maple, got a little basswood here, and then I've got an ironwood or hop hornbeam, and then I also got myself some honey locust. So these are from local seed. They're not native to here, but they are native to Ontario, just further south. But they do well here. These are OG honey locust. They've got little thorns. They lost a bunch of leaves to frost, but they're bouncing back pretty good. So yeah, hope they do well.